What's up, YouTube? It's your Huckleberry here, back with a series of videos for you guys. I got about 5 really good videos involving Tupac. So I put this series of videos together that I hope you guys really enjoy. And this video I got for you is about his main ride that went missing or just kind of fell off the grid. And this guy located it, found it, purchased it. Really interesting story as he lays it out, and it gives you a lot of good feedback about Death Row and the vehicles they had back in the day. He's going through all of Tupac's vehicles over the years. Really cool video. So without further ado, enjoy the video. Give me some likes down below, guys. I really would appreciate it. Let's do it.
So my dad loved cars, and having 2 kids, he couldn't really own his dream car. But one of the cars he was absolutely in love with was a 1995 black on tan Corniche that his friend had had back in the day out west. But as I started growing up and messing with cars more, I always figured, I might be able to get him one day. So I began searching for Corniches, black on tan Corniches. It was always in the back of my mind. I realized that it was a very rare car. Being in 1995, there were only 25 of them, and so
Damn.
I started to kind of put together a little bit of a registry on them and start mapping out the VIN numbers that had come to America and see which ones could have possibly been the same car. And I had found a couple other black ones, and I also kind of knew in the back of my mind that Death Row Records had one or even two, and it turns out they actually had three. So they were able to check off quite a few of the VINs, and I started to realize that there were only a couple of black ones and only one with the black on tan interior. As I had done research into the Death Row cars and trying to piece together all the last for sale listings and whatnot of Corniche 4s, I came across a registration that had sold in 2017 by Alexander Historical Auctions of one of the Death Row Rolls Royces that belonged to Tupac. Now, the registration number on it had started with a 2 on that card, but I knew just from owning Bentleys and Rolls Royces that it should have been an S because that's what every car manufactured in the UK has. So the last 6 digits, the serial number, the chassis number, did line up with one of the US VIN numbers on the Bentley Heritage website that I didn't have any information on, so I had deduced that that was likely the black on tan one. But if you know anything about Lamborghinis and whatnot, sometimes the chassis number being the same, it can be the same as a different car, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same car. So that was kind of problematic because this was the only black on tan one that had matched exactly what I remember my dad being in love with. And if this was Tupac's car and this was the same car that was on the registration, it's obviously a very expensive car. However, it didn't really make sense because this registration was sold very publicly in 2017, but this VIN number that I had was sold in 2018 just by a regular used car dealership for a couple thousand under market value. So it didn't exactly line up, and I had my extreme doubts about it. So I kind of didn't know what to make of it, and I went to the guy's house and knocked on his door, and he did have the car and showed it to me. Now, this car had been serviced at, chain shops and was kind of in a bit of a neglected state, not being drivable, but he had it, and it was actually, knowing what I know now, it was parked next to a black on black E38 7 Series, which just gave me goosebumps as soon as I walked in with my suspicions. So I didn't know if this car was the same one on that registration, if this was Tupac's car, if this was a different VIN number. All I knew was I was standing with a black on tan 1 of 25 Corniche that someone was willing to sell me, and it was my dad's dream car. So I took the gamble no matter what on it, and I couldn't wait to pull up in front of my dad's house with this dream car after we had fixed it. So we had agreed on a number that was strong for a non-running Corniche, but not strong if it was Tupac's car. And I had, even asked him, did you hear anything, any stories you could tell me about this car? Because I believe it was in Vegas at certain points and was a California car. Do you have any history whatsoever? And he didn't. It was just a regular used car. So I went back to the hotel, waited for the wire to clear the next morning, and when it did, I picked up a U-Haul trailer. We loaded it on, and I started the drive home. So I'm driving home with this car on my trailer thinking either I'm going to make my dad very happy or I just secured an extremely significant car and I have a very expensive car on the back of my trailer and I have to be very careful with it. So I
Wow.
was kind of getting a little bit more nervous, and even as the night came, I didn't even get a hotel. I just drove through. I was way too nervous to leave the car unattended, and I just got it home and started doing a ton of research. So after I get it home, I take the biggest sigh of relief ever, and I decided to start really diving deep into this car. Like I said, I still had my doubts because every time you see this car mentioned, it's, oh, it's not Tupac's. Oh, that was Suge Knight's car. Oh, that was just Death Row's car. Oh, they were rentals. Everyone switched them out. So I didn't actually know, even if this was the death row car, what the story behind it actually was. So I began reaching out to a lot of different people who were associated with death row and really tracing employees, records, everything that I could from back in the 90s. So I start going down the rabbit hole hard, trying to find every possible mention of this car. And part of what makes Tupac memorabilia so intriguing is that there's so much mystique and mystery around his death that nobody really has all of the answers, and that's why these documentaries still come out and interviews still happen. And so no matter if it was true or not, I wanted to compile everything I could possibly find on this car and paint a picture. So really what I had to figure out first was, what was the arrangement with this car and how did the death row corniches come to be? I spoke with Reggie Wright Jr., who was actually extremely nice to me, gave me the time of day, and was willing to help me compile as much history as he could. And he had told me that in October of 1995, the Death Row entourage had went to a Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and Mike Tyson had pulled up in a brand new Bentley Azure. It's kind of a famous photo of him at a gas station with a crooked Nevada plate on it. That was the car in question, and when Suge Knight saw that car, Suge Knight wanted one, and so an order was placed through David Kenner and the management company with Death Row's main car broker at the time, a guy named Stan, and his son had actually reached out to me, Vault Detail, on Instagram with a very cool story about the car and said, you need to speak with my dad because he sold the cars to these guys brand new. And the story goes is that he had 2 weeks to source these cars, and Suge Knight had wanted a very specific red one because it was a blood, and 3 other ones delivered at the same time within 2 weeks on top of the dealership's parking garage in Thousand Oaks, California. And it was not only hard to get them approved through the Nesson dealership, but he actually had a hard time sourcing the cars, being that they came from all over. Suge Knight's red car came from Atlanta, Tupac's black on tan came from La Jolla or Pasadena, the black on black David Kenner car came from La Jolla as well, and the white Bentley for Snoop Dogg was in stock at Nesson Motor Cars. So on the delivery day, Suge Knight, Snoop Dogg, David Kenner, Tupac, and Reggie Wright all took delivery of these cars and immediately convoyed them to the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, March 16th, that Saturday, for the Mike Tyson versus Bruno fight. And this was obviously before the days of Bluetooth or anything, and they had synced all 4 radios in the car to the same radio station, and by the time they left the parking garage, every speaker in every car was blown. But they drove them to Las Vegas with Reggie Wright actually driving Tupac's car so that he could ride with Suge Knight. And there's actually plenty of photos from that day of the car in Vegas. And I didn't even know until I started researching that that was the day that the car was purchased, when it still had the Nesson tags on it, photographed at the Bruno fight. So I asked Reggie what the deal was with these cars, whether they were rentals, whether they were swapped around, and he actually confirmed that no, each person had gotten one and paid for the car at about $5,000 a month out of their royalties, and it was a lease. And Tupac had kept his car for about 7 months and put just over 4,000 miles on it, driving back and forth from Vegas. I absolutely loved finding some of the first-hand stories that are lesser known about this car, and one of my favorite ones was from a...
Yo, this is a pretty cool story. This is hearing about how all 4 of these cars were purchased at the same time for each individual. I wonder if this is actually Pac's car and if this guy came across the gym or not.
Rapper named Anthony Forte. And what Anthony had said was he sent a woman out to Rikers Island to go visit Tupac, give him some money, and just show him some love. And when they had encountered each other again after they had gotten out of prison, they met up in a shopping center in Los Angeles. And what he had said was, we embraced and we painted the whole town, Los Angeles, day and night, having fun, supermodels, bottles, going full throttle in the drop-top Rolls Royce, just having fun. You couldn't separate us. As a matter of fact, Suge Knight was looking for us. There was an APB out on rapping Forte and Tupac Shakur. So to calm Suge Knight down, when we did finally get back in the studio, we put together a song, Only God Can Judge Me, and history was made. Which is just one of my favorite stories, because having an absolute bender of a lifetime and then going to record that song is just insanely cool. Another Outlaws member, Young Noble, had stated he loved riding with the top down, loved the California vibe, and he would always want us to roll blunts in the drop top with the top down. He would look at us, me and Gaddafi were great blunt rollers, and he would say, what the are you doing? Roll up. So we'd be in the drop top Rolls or Mercedes or something, and this guy is speeding some damn where, and I'm trying to roll a blunt without spilling a half ounce of weed in his car. Nothing was easy with that dude. He would test you like that. Roll your blunts while I go 80 with the top down. On more than one occasion, there's a lot of first-hand stories of him rolling around in this car playing Frank Sinatra, which he was a very big fan of. There's a lot of news interviews. He pulled up to the Gridlock music video and a now famous clip of him driving the car. There was also a YouTube video of him being interviewed while listening to his own song, All Eyes on Me, in the car. So he really had a lot of fun times in that car. Now, one of the things that I've heard frequently is that he really could not drive, and if you watch that video of him pulling up to the Gridlock music shoot, you can see he is extremely choppy with the brakes. One of his friends, Scarface, has actually said no one would ride with him because we all knew better. To say Tupac was proud of this car was an understatement. I mean, actually, in the auction with the license plates and registration, the close friend consignor had said it was his pride and joy, and his mom had agreed. It's obvious in how much he had mentioned it in his songs, evident in lyrics like, "Rollin' in my double R, rugged and ruthless, keep a vest for the hard times, knowing it's useless," which is just like crazy statement now, knowing what we know. He was extremely proud of this car, and actually all of the Death Row cars were a central point in the record label and in their lifestyle. So Death Row had so many cars. Some of them were leases, some of them were purchases. And he had actually had many limos custom built for him. In the word of his bookkeeper, they would take a limo to the bathroom if they could. So one of the shops that they had a lot of custom work done at was the now famous One Stop Auto Sounds and Accessory in West Covina. It started from a tire shop guy who had went into customizing cars, and there's a famous video of Tupac walking around that shop where you can actually see a lot of the Death Row cars. Suge Knight's green slant-nose Porsche, his red dually Suburban, 57 Chevy, his magenta SL with an AMG kit, and I had actually found out after the fact that the reason they were red and green is because those are the blood colors. I didn't know green was a blood color. So that's why he had all these different cars, and he modified them extensively. Now, one of the cool things that Reggie had said to me on the phone was, without even asking him, he had volunteered, have you found the secret compartments in the Rolls Royce yet? And I said, no, like, are there really compartments? And actually, I remembered right as I said that there was one found in the BMW's door. And I spoke with the guy who has Suge Knight's red car, and there are plenty of compartments. So I'm not going to say exactly how to open it, but it was extremely convoluted. Like, put the blinker on and turn on switches and press brakes, and a mechanical
What?
compartment will pop out from underneath the dash.
What?
Obviously, they were felons, they couldn't have guns, but they needed guns. So a lot of the Death Row
Damn.
cars, in fact, almost all of them, had secret compartments in them. Which, honestly, I was thinking is probably why I had so much problems with the ignition. Now, the broker that I had spoken with had told me he got them a lot of different cars. The Hummers, which Snoop Dogg had a blue one, Tupac had the black one, H1s. Black 850 CSI for David Kenner. I'm still trying to figure out why there's a silver 850 that Tupac was pictured in, but Kenner had a black on black one. They had actually rarely used license plates. Even though not all of the cars were sourced from Nesson, they all still drove around on Nesson license plates or One Stop, and that's evident in a lot of the music videos too. You can see those tags on the cars. So a little bit of story about Death Row and how it started, if you don't know, and Tupac's life and how this all relates to the cars. Death Row was funded by Interscope Records. That was their distribution company, and a guy who had founded that was Jimmy Iovine. Other companies had been quoted as saying, life is too short to get involved with Suge Knight. But Jimmy is comfortable with gangsters. He's a street guy himself. Suge Knight had started Death Row with Dr. Dre, but it wasn't until, Tupac had came into the picture that it really blew up into what it was. And Suge wasn't actually into the idea of Tupac being an artist initially. It was once he became a thug and was kind of convicted of crimes and beating people up and whatnot that he became more attractive to Suge and he wanted him on. Now, Iovine had actually said to Suge Knight with regards to Interscope Records, take this kid, take him please. He's out of control, you can control him, take him, about Tupac. And that he should work with Dr. Dre and Death Row Records, but Tupac didn't want to leave Interscope. They had fronted him $600,000 while he was in jail, but it wasn't enough and they weren't willing to give him more, and a lot of it's speculation that it was because they wanted to squeeze him out and move him into Death Row. Some of Tupac's friends had absolutely steadfast said that was a terrible thing to do, and Tupac's response to them was, you guys are too nice. Suge Knight and David Kenner, the lawyer for Death Row Records, visited Tupac at Dannemora Correctional Facility and promised to win him bail, which it was looking like he was not going to get up until that point. And not only to bail him out, that Death Row Records was going to be the guarantor, but to make Tupac a superstar, to end his financial troubles, buy his mom a house. They promised him the world and freedom, most of all. Kenner had came with a handwritten 3-page contract, and the next week he was bailed out, picked up from prison in a limo, and started with Death Row Records. After Tupac arrived at Death Row, the lifestyle kind of blew up with clothes, cars, jewelry, pendants, trips, all of that just into high gear, and he had to kind of prove himself to Suge Knight. So Tupac had actually supposedly partook in some enforcement activities, some violence himself, and his friends had said he was kind of a chameleon in situations, was one of their quotes. So it wasn't exactly like him. He was just doing this to kind of prove himself to Suge.
I'm kind of speechless right now. I just want to listen to this guy talk and tell this story. But this is fascinating to me about these cars and Tupac's transition out of Interscope into Death Row and all that.
Knight. Eventually, as Tupac progressed, he had created his Euthanasia label. He had, the Outlaws, his cousin, to work with. He had movie deals. He had commercials, and he was just moving on to bigger and better things. And he wanted a friendship with Suge Knight, but to dismantle kind of their business dealings together. He basically wanted out of Death Row. Some of the artists who had dealt with Death Row, like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, had felt that they weren't exactly compensated fairly, to put it lightly, and that they had kind of walked away with nothing. And when Tupac saw this happen, he knew, if Dr. Dre, a founder, can walk away with nothing from Death Row Records, what can I walk away with? He would be in an even worse position. So at 25 years old, you have to remember, he didn't even think he was going to live that long. He was certain he wasn't going to live that long and to be doing better than he imagined. He didn't really care. So the real turning point came on August 27th, little over a week before his death, when he fired David Kenner, the Death Row lawyer. Kenner, it was said, wouldn't allow Tupac to access his original recording cassettes, and Tupac went ballistic, fired him on the spot, and his friends could not believe it. In fact, they were quoted as saying, in regard to the situation, "He was brilliant but not smart. You cannot fire Kenner, you cannot leave Death Row," and everyone knew that. And it's understandable how Suge Knight felt, because just months prior, in March of '96, Dr. Dre had left the label, and so he was really banking on Tupac. Finding out that Tupac had other plans was not going to go over well with him. And fast forward to September 7th, when Suge Knight had planned a party at his Club 662, which, by the way, is MOB on a phone pad, and that doesn't just mean mob, it means Member of Bloods. So Club 662 was literally Club Member of Bloods. After the Mike Tyson fight on the 7th, they had went back there. Now, it's pretty well known what had happened that fight. He, got into it with Orlando Anderson, a Crip member, about him stealing a Death Row chain. They had gotten a fight about it, a physical altercation, and he went back to his hotel for 2 hours. Now, it should be noted that that morning, Tupac had actually just came back to LA from New York City, so he didn't exactly feel like going to Las Vegas, and actually told his friends he wanted to go to Atlanta to deal with some family issues and whatnot, his relatives out there. When he was in his hotel room, he spoke to Kadada Jones and told her that he wanted to take his Hummer, as they had a lot of things to discuss, and he insisted he ride in the BMW with him. A former Death Row Records bodyguard said it was kind of unusual that they weren't armed in the car and Tupac didn't have his vest on, that they didn't have a security guard in the vehicle with them, and that they were just kind of driving alone, coupled with the fact that the black Supra that was driven by Bunty couldn't keep up with a '94 Cadillac. Basically, that car had taken fire, and that was actually another pretty significant Death Row car. It was in a police report, having sustained bullet damage in the police chase trying to chase the Cadillac. Just over 1 month later, on October 22nd, Suge Knight went to jail for a parole violation. By the end of that year, Snoop Dogg was planning his exit. Everything began to unravel, and in 1997, Interscope cut ties with Death Row Records. So, while all of the Death Row history is pretty well known, what a lot of us watching this want to know is what happened to the cars. Obviously,
Right.
I now own the Tupac Rolls Royce, and it's in New York with me. It has about 73,000 miles on it now, and we've done some minor work to it, some mechanical reconditioning, some servicing, very minor paint touch-ups here and
So he does have Tupac's car. He got it on a steal too. The guy he bought it from wasn't even taking care of it, didn't even know it was Pac's car. That's amazing to me.
there, and the car is in still very good condition with what we believe to be original leather and mainly original paint. Even though it was kind of well on its way of being neglected, it still was a very nice car. According to what I heard from not only Reggie Wright, but the bookkeeper and a couple other people in Death Row Records, the Rolls Royces, all being leases, were actually all turned back early except for Suge Knight's, and he had purchased his and kept it until about 2001, 2002. But the other cars were turned back all in in late 1996, if not 1997 in the case of Snoop Dogg. Tupac's first car, a 1992 Cherokee Limited black on black, was bought brand new in LA before actually coming to the Atlanta area and being scrapped with about 200,000 miles in 2006, which is an absolute shame. His white 60s Impala lowrider with the mural on the trunk was not finished in time for him to receive it. According to Reggie, his two cars, which I've confirmed that were in his name at the time of his death, were the green Jaguar XJ and the black Hummer H1. Reggie had said that both of those cars came from him doing a St. Ives commercial in the Club 662. I believe at least one of them did, because that's what his mom said, but both of those cars the family had gotten and had sold them off, and they are now publicly well known today. After Tupac died and Suge went to prison, a lot of the death row cars were given back early if they were leases or sold off. Much of Suge's possessions were put in storage in California and Las Vegas, including some of the cars, which included the dually Suburban, his Rolls Royce, the 57 Chevy that he had, a lot of which ended up being sold to a place in Long Beach, California in the early 2000s. The other Rolls Royces and Bentley convertible are still around. David Kenner's car is still around, and Snoop Dogg's white car is still around, and I've been in touch with both of those owners on them. Snoop Dogg's blue Hummer, he had actually dumped. It was a lease as well around the same time in early 97 when he left death row, the same time he had given back his white Bentley. Tupac did have a car that not many people knew he had, which was a white Land Cruiser, and I had actually confirmed because there was a lot of confusion as to whether his friend Hussein Fatal had totaled the Range Rover that he owned that he was pictured in, which was a white on tan Range Rover, or his Land Cruiser, and a bunch of people have now confirmed it was the Land Cruiser that he totaled. So if you look up, Tupac cars, a lot of them mention a Range Rover in there. He didn't actually own that Range Rover. That was prior to him being at Death Row Records, from what my research says. So he didn't own the Range Rover that people do think he had. The 500 SL, the $1 million question, that car was never actually missing. I can't say too much about it, but it was never missing. I can say with reasonable certainty today that all of the Tupac cars are accounted for. And
So I believe that's the one that they found. That's why he can't comment on it. I believe that's the one that was in the garage
he had
that they
the
found.
500 SL, the $1 million question. That car was never actually missing. I can't say too
Right.
much about it.
It wasn't actually missing. It was just in storage all this time. And it was in that garage that they couldn't open because the garage was in litigation. Death Row tried to claim it, and Tupac's family was trying to claim it. The garage and everything inside. I believe, now I'm not 100%, but I believe that's the same car that when they did get in there, that he had a pack out bag and everything because he was ready to dip.
But it was never missing. I can say with reasonable certainty today that all of the Tupac cars are accounted for, and I'm working with some of the people from Death Row firsthand if any of the remaining cars, like the totaled Land Cruiser, can be saved.
Now, remember, Snoop owns Death Row now. Snoop, just a few years back, purchased Death Row.
It's looking like they can. It's looking like we've exhausted all of our options and all of the Tupac cars have come back to light. But this Rolls Royce really single-handedly sparked an entirely new interest of mine. After seeing how it really was not only possible to track down a car, but extremely fun to do this research. In the year plus that I've owned it, it basically started my hobby and specialty of tracking down specific historical cars, not just happening to come across them and buying cool ones that I like, but actually chasing specific cars. It was the catalyst for all of my searching, including the Victoria's Secret Lamborghini search. And, little did I know when I had this somewhat ugly Rolls-Royce Corniche on the back of a U-Haul trailer being towed by a Craigslist navigator that I was not only making history with hip-hop memorabilia, but that I can say without a shred of exaggeration
Bro,
that car absolutely started what I am today and changed my life.
that's a dope story, guys. That was really cool. I just stumbled across that video, but that's a highly entertaining video. Kudos to that guy for doing all the research. I can't believe he got Tupac's rolls like that on a steel. Oh man, what a find that was. Um, but it's very interesting to hear that history with all of Tupac's cars and the Death Row vehicles as well. I grew up during this whole East West and Death Row time when they were at their peak. And I remember the music videos and the cars and everything. So it's kind of nostalgic for me to sit there and watch these clips and be like, oh yeah, and then know exactly the story behind all those cars and whatnot. So anyway, thanks for watching the video, guys. It's very cool. Glad you came out. I'm your Huckleberry. You can call me Huck. We're going to keep going down the Tupac rabbit hole. So look out for the next video. I hope I see you then. You're a daisy if you do. Peace!